Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining in. I hope you are well and in good health. I'm Javier Burón from Colaborativa. We are based in Córdoba right now. It's very hot here. I just turned my fan and my air conditioning. So today we are going to introduce the CityxChange plus CityxChange Citizen Participation Playbook. We are going to present the framework, the playbook that we prepare for the project, give a little bit of introduction on the context of how this framework fits in the big plus CityxChange project, and then show you how we are implementing the project, the playbook within the project. Okay, the structure of the presentation, try to make it short, 25 minutes max. We are Colaborativa. We are part of this plus CityxChange project. We are a small company based in the south of Europe. We have been working for 10 years on citizen participation, bottom-up technology. So we are very interested in this process in which bottom-up and technologies can help citizens to communicate better with municipalities. And we have worked with several municipalities and also promote our own projects in the past. So why citizen participation is important? I guess that each of the attendees on the talk will have a very good answer to that. I just want to frame, on the frame of the plus CityxChange project, this is about smart cities. There was a manifesto of citizen engagement in 2017, stating the importance of citizen participation and citizen engagement. I'm going to use engagement and participation indistinctly. We can have a conversation about that because it's also very interesting. Depending on how you frame participation and engagement, it could be more sensible to use one or the other. But I'm going to use it in this way. Also in Spanish, funnily enough, we use participation and engagement, almost the same word. So why is important in smart cities projects? Well, we know that smart cities rely a lot on new advanced technologies, but as the manifesto stated, it's extremely important that we don't lose sight of, despite this is, these projects, cities involved in smart cities, we are relying on a lot of different technologies. This needs to be citizen-centric or human-centric, right? So technologies are great, but we need to keep the citizen on the center of the equation. Otherwise, we can lead to extremely sophisticated and complex technological solutions that they don't have any traction on citizens, right? So it's important because we are in a smart city project or within the context of a smart city project. We can't lose track of these for citizens, and citizens are the center of all this. So plus CityxChange is a positive CityxChange is a big project involving 7 cities across whole Europe. I tried to summarize in a single sentence. It's quite complex, quite dense, with a lot of bottom-up, top-down, municipalities, small companies, big companies, small. But I think if I can summarize it in one word, in one sentence, would be 7 cities experimenting or exploring smart positive energy solutions and technologies for making districts to produce more energy that is consumed. So again, this is like a pure technological challenge, but it's not. The way the project has been structured, in summary, just we are using like 3 different strategies. So we are developing new decision support tools for planning. We are introducing a series of new technologies to create a common energy market. And on top of all that, we are generating a community exchange, which is a very wide plan for this citizen participation. This includes from creating bold city visions, like top-down approaches for long-term transformation, to create robust frameworks for citizen engagement, like what we did with the Playbook, and also a number of educational frameworks, innovation frameworks, and all these frameworks are combined in what we call community exchange. So we Collaborativa, we were leading like the creation of the citizen participation playbook. It's a vast document. It was submitted in March. It has almost 200 pages, and now we are in the process of, in some way, digesting this. I'm producing a smaller bits so we can facilitate this dissemination, not only around all the partners involved in the project, but also outside the project. So this webinar is one of the actions to do that. So in a nutshell, the playbook, it is divided in 3 parts. The first is like an introduction to citizen participation. We compile that into 6 practices, best practices of different cases compiled from numerous other Horizon 2020 projects, the work of done in other cities, third agents that are working on citizen participation in Europe. Then we focus on the processes themselves. So we describe in great detail a number of processes and the tools that are needed to develop this process. And then we have a third section in which this is more connected to the project itself. It's about assessing the situation in each city, understanding the context of each city, and giving some recommendations to get started on implementing the playbook. On the webinar, we follow more or less the same process, but in the last part, the idea is just trying to make it a bit more abstract, so it could be useful for any city. So as I said, we define 6 best practices. This is coming from analyzing other Horizon 2020, looking at other cities that we found in Europe, some cities doing extremely interesting innovative work on citizen participation, supported not only by online tools, technology, but also by very well integrated physical events and approaches, right? So it's not all about the kind of online systems that you put in place, but also the culture that you create in your organization. So I'm not going to go through all of them. I had just, because we want to make this agile, so I selected 2 that we think are relevant. The first one will be clear purpose and front loading. So it's extremely important. This might seem obvious, but we found that when people, organizations and teams are coordinating new citizen engagement processes, sometimes we tend to forget this principle. So it's extremely important that we are able to describe clearly how this citizen participation process, how it's going to affect the outcomes of the whole process. So again, if we are not able to describe it in a single sentence, then we need to go back to the drawing board and work again to try to refine that, because it's a very useful exercise to synthesize what is the kind of final purpose of that, how all these citizen inputs, engagement are going to be translated into actual things implemented by the municipalities. So, and in order to do that successfully, we need to, again, this is something that has been discussed for a long time in all these circles and forums of citizen participation. It can be, citizen engagement can't happen at the end of the process. It needs to be brought back at the very early stages of the process. An example of that is the air quality and climate change plan for the city of Madrid. They did a very interesting process that took a few months, but they started the process by creating 15 and 20, between 15 and 20 open questions just to get started the conversation. And this has a kind of a dual purpose. It was a way to, without having like a big, complicated document, well-thought document, to start engaging with the citizens. It's just open questions created in just asking. These questions were not just created unilaterally by the municipal team. And then these questions have this dual purpose. First, to start the conversation, and then the questions were introducing a system that could be voted. So you could allow comments, but also voting. And so in that way, you can get like a prioritization of questions that were seen more relevant for the plan to the citizens. And then you can use that to start writing documents. So it's like a stepping down a little bit, devise a mechanism to allow people to be able to engage earlier in the process. Then continuous engagement. And this is also, it seems obvious, but again, it's hard to implement if you don't have a clear roadmap. So two ways of doing continuous engagement through the whole process, during the preparation and implementation phase. It's also very important, not only during the engagement phase itself, but what happened after that. Right? So capacity training, you need to engage in a continuous way to generate more informed decisions, especially if we are talking things that are complex or involve technologies that maybe they are not so widespread. We need to create a complete it needs to happen during the whole process. This kind of capacity training, and there are several mechanisms to do that as well. And then transparency, of course, and accountability. And this is also a bit difficult when we are working with municipalities. We say it's very important to inform of all the success, but it's also very important to inform of the failures. And I know that this is sometimes difficult to manage politically or in terms of communication within an organization, but there are ways of doing that so people understand that it's a way of creating a level of trust that is difficult if all the social media is always only talking about the positive and not talking about the challenges that the kind of these processes are facing, right? This creates unrealistic expectations, and then people don't feel engaged in the process, or in the latest when the implementation happens, nobody's really happy about it. We have an example in another Horizon 2020 project in Graz with the Smarter Labs, the Creating Living Labs in several cities. We thought that this was interesting because they had to change, or they wanted to implement certain actions in a district that has challenging issues, people with no access to online technologies, or from certain marginalized backgrounds that they didn't want to engage, and they had to be consistently creating events that they were appealing to them, educational events for kids, but it was something that it was very long term, and at the beginning it didn't have a good footfall. We need to understand these processes. So if we do something and it doesn't work in terms of attendance, it's not that we need to address it. maybe change things, but we need to be constant and keep doing, especially if we want to engage with certain profiles or backgrounds that they haven't engaged in certain in this process before. Okay, so then we move into the processes that are explained in great detail. We tried not to make too many of them because, you know, if you prepare these manuals and then there are so many options, then it's easy to get lost. So we synthesize this in 4 different processes that we think they cover a good range of citizen participation needs in municipalities, especially in small size municipalities that we did interviews with them during this process. One is, well, the first one, co-creation of urban interventions. Second, collaborative legislation, participatory budgeting, and citizen proposals. The first 2 are kind of can define it as a top-down process in which it's started by the municipality. They are kind of similar to things that are going on at the moment, and like by legal requirement called substation process, but we introduce certain elements that brings an earlier participation, as we said, on the best practices, while maintaining technical and quality and feasibility. That's very important. Sometimes when we talk with officials, they're worried that if we start too early asking citizens, you know, then we are transforming this process into a chaotic process, and that's not the case. If we do it with a good plan, we can ask citizens very early in the process while keeping a strong voice on the technical issues that need to be addressed by experts, right? And that brings citizen engagement during the whole process. The first one was more intended for things that are happening on the kind of public space, and the second one is something more related with you know, municipal plans or municipal legislation, in which it's kind of similar, but it has some of the phases are slightly different. The third one is something that is being implemented in many cities across the world, participatory budgeting. Apart from being you know, an interesting process that it's still being studied and being assessed because it's kind of an early, you know, we don't have a lot of experience. It's 25, 30 years old. But something that experts recognize is not only about distributing municipal budgets, but also it really improves the understanding of how budgets are, how the money is spent, how it's used in municipalities. So citizens are not only part of deciding where the money goes, but also provides a very great understanding of all the challenges, limitations, you know, of how municipality budgeting works. So it has kind of this dual purpose. And the fourth one is a more innovative approach that we are starting to see in certain cities, which is a truly bottom-up process, right? That provides a means for citizen innovation. It's like a crowdfunding type of approach. It's like citizens, they need to organize themselves, they have to raise awareness, they have to seek for support, and then we provide, there is a system that provides the capacity of this kind of grassroots projects to be able to incorporate in municipalities in a, I would say, organized way. The process artists we have are described verbally, like in detail. We have different phases, steps. You know, we have this kind of summary of the process. Then we go into detail. We describe each phase. We give an idea of the schedule, the time that is needed based on previous research. We also identify the different stakeholders that they need to participate in each phase, in each step. We also talk about a series of physical and online tools that are kind of the main ones for each step. And then we provide some kind of an idea of how to make this process transparent and accountable through the whole process, right? So just talking about these tools, when we were doing the research, we found out that there are dozens, even of hundreds of these tools for citizen engagement. Each organization has a manual that has many of these. So the way we wanted to approach it was instead of listing like dozens or even hundreds of different tools, we analyzed the tools. We analyzed the tools in regard with the whole participatory process, that the roadmap that I just showed. We tried to create categories in which we could organize all these tools, even new ones that we will found through the implementation. And then we created a number of 7 categories for physical tools and 7 categories for online tools. And then we listed a number of them. And we think these 7, like these 14 different categories cover almost all the range of activities in citizen participation that we know of. So, of course, we can't summarize 200 pages in detail in a short webinar. The document is there. You can go to the CityxChange plus CityxChange website, knowledge base, and you have there all the public documents. Also, you can contact us. You have my email details, and we can have a conversation on how to apply these processes in your own municipality or for your own participation processes. So finally, we are going to talk a little bit on how to use this. Again, we imagine that you have read the document and then you go through that, or you have met with us. We give you like an understanding of the whole playbook in this whole extension. The first thing that we recommend is that you gather your team, the team that has been assigned. You understand the different experiences, because sometimes then you realize at the beginning of the process that the person that you're working with, that maybe doesn't have a title that involves, or you can imagine that they have been involved in citizen participation. They have been in this process before, and they have an experience and they have a saying. Also, it's important to get an understanding of, let's say that in a different department, they tried something, before, or they brought some consultants, these things work well or didn't work well. Sometimes this information can be buried in your organization, and sometimes it's hard to find it, because maybe your team doesn't have anyone related to that previous experience. Now this is becoming a way of creating these online knowledge bases. So these things are internally recorded, but this is a kind of a new thing, right? So you can access things that has been done in different departments. So first, we recommend to see what happened before. Also, if there are activist groups working in your city on citizen participation, it would be very interesting to know what it has been done by then, if they are interested in engaging in this process or not. And maybe they can, you don't need consultants, because you have also already people in your municipality that has a lot of expertise and are willing to work with you. So the second will be to define the outcome of the participatory process. It's like the type of outcome. This is important. We need to ask ourselves what type of outcome we are expecting out of this, and how this is going to be, how the participation of citizens can affect this outcome, right? It's going to be an action plan. It's going to be a physical intervention, infrastructure, changing the street paving, things like that. It's something that is related of how the money is spent. We realize that when we start asking these things, a lot of times, you know, the idea of behavioral change. We want to change behavior in citizens. We think that's a very loose term, and we need to really try to break these loose terms into actionable things. So behavioral change can be achieved by many different ways, and we need to find, you know, actionable topics. So we can use citizen participation to influence really actions in your organization, in your municipality. Okay, so once we have this outcome, we just can go to the playbook. We've seen these four. It doesn't need to fit perfectly. It's just something that more or less the outcome is it aligns with that, and then we can have a look at the process in detail with the deadlines and milestones, and we start seeing how we can align, because these processes in the playbook are kind of abstract because they're intended to be useful for many different cases. So now we have to put it in like the real constraints of already set deadlines or milestones of things that we don't have control. They are coming from the outside, and we need to kind of squeeze and tweak the processes to fit our purposes. And then we can select if certain phases can be, you know, shrinking or widen, or we have to remove some steps. But you know, comparing that with an ideal process is kind of useful. And then finally, based on the resources that we have for that particular project, we can decide the physical and online tools. We recommend not, you know, we are not going to try to sell you a new fancy new tool. It's better just, that you try to use what is already there, because if you start introducing many tools, and I think we have all experienced this during the last few months, suddenly we are exposed to so many tools, so many new things, so many new processes that you know, we don't get things done because we are just trying to navigate through this chaos of new tools. So sometimes new tools are necessary because we don't have a way of implementing that with our current tool set. But we recommend to introduce as less as possible in the new process. So then we can assess what happened, and then like rinse and iterate, and then maybe introduce a new tool in the process. But try to be resourceful with the tools that you already have. So now we are going to introduce 2 examples that how the playbook is being implemented in the CityxChange project. Sorry, these are working in progress. We presented the playbook in March, and then we have the whole confinement situation. So some of these are changing right now, and we're still in conversations. But I think it's useful in order to see how these abstract diagrams are put into real plans, right? So the first one, the first conversation that we started having in February, right before we submitted the playbook, was the idea of, you know, as part of the Limericks, the development plan, that is an ongoing process that is very long, as you know, these kind of city development plans, they have a lot of steps, and they have legal requirements regarding consultation and participation. We wanted to tap on this on the Plus CityxChange project, and the idea was based on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, that is kind of a hot topic now that a lot of people are talking about, is how we can localize, prioritize these goals for the case of Limerick, right? There are 17 goals. there are too many, we feel, sometimes to start a conversation, a widened public discussion. So it's good to be able to digest this a little bit in order to be presented in a more, in something that people can relate more. And maybe if they relate more, they will be able to suggest, better ideas for the local implementation. This process is connected with, we selected the process number 2, which is collaborative legislation, and it's connected with the Bold City Vision framework that you can find on the same place, which is this framework for allowing long-term transformation in cities. So this is our process is connected with that another CityxChange process part of the community exchange plan. So I put on top the I would say abstract collaborative legislation idea, the process as is included on the playbook, and then on the bottom part is how this translates into an actual concrete plan. I won't go into detail, maybe we can have that on the discussion, but you see that, for example, the second phase of generating a preliminary public debate is the phase that we transform into the prioritization and localization of the Sustainable Development Goals by using co-design workshops, an online debate, there's some public engagement events, and then voting stations. And this is what I was talking about, being understand your context, because in the process of the development planning process, there are a set of consultation events that they need to happen by they had to happen legally. So we are going to tap into, or that's the plan, tap into this process. So because we are already bringing the people to a place, we can also have a small introduction on Sustainable Development Goals, and then having voting stations to have citizens to in a very simple way to start prioritizing which goals are more important to them. During the conversations, we thought it could be also interesting to connect that to a certain kind of mapping of localization of these the Sustainable Development Goals. If we do this in a way that we can track the results in different districts of the city, we not only are getting which goals are more important for citizens, but also which are the challenges that different parts of the city are facing, right? Then we are using all this information to prepare a draft that's done in a smaller group with experts, with other partners. And then we prepare that draft of actions and we show that to the public. And then we have a process in which these actions can be tweaked and maybe voted by the citizens. So you see this process, or they normally open up to the public in like a wide twice during the process. So in a preliminary way, and then for voting of the actions themselves. And then these actions can be translated into a document and adopted by the development plan included there. And then, of course, we need certain steps for making sure that we are tracking the progress of each different action. In Limerick, for example, we have the City Engage Week to do that, to give updates or use narrative tools. If these actions are, physically impacting our city, we can create events in which we walk around the city and show this progress and have a conversation with the citizens on the challenges that we are facing on this progress, right? So this is a very short explanation. We can go in detail afterwards. Then the second will be the open call protocol. So Limerick is designing a program of open calls to allow citizen innovation in certain parts of the city. This is connected with the framework for positive energy districts, positive energy blocks, the innovation labs, which is not public yet, but it's going to be very soon in the next 3 months, I believe. If you look at the 4 projects, you could see, well, this is like a citizen proposal, but it's not really a citizen proposal. After analyzing the characteristics of these open calls, we thought that the process 1, the co-creation of urban interventions, will fit better. And now I'm going to give the reasons why. So on the top, you can see again the kind of the abstract, different stages and steps for this process. And then on the bottom part is kind of the initial ideas on how to plan that. When we have open calls, what we found is it's very interesting if we bring, instead of writing the brief internally, is creating a process in which the brief can be co-designed with citizens, right? This is a twofold strategy. First, it introduces the challenge in advance, in advance. So the open call, when the open call is launched, there will be a lot of people or more people aware of this call because we have been engaging with them and talking with them and refining the brief with them, right? So this makes the call more likely to have more entrants. Like people will participate more because they have been aware. Sometimes in these open calls, I'm sure that that happens to you, that people are saying, well, it's very interesting, but I never heard about it. You didn't communicate it properly. It's very difficult to find everyone, especially when we have things that have certain deadlines and other processes. So if we create like a preliminary step in which we try to incorporate ideas, we are just getting more time for people to get know the call, right? Then we can decide a set of questions to inform the brief, and we can make these questions open to the public and then get the responses. So again, instead of creating the brief internally, we make a set of questions that's done in a smaller group. Then we make that, we open to the floor these questions, and people can respond. And then on the open call itself, I'm looking at the time and I want to have time for the questions and answers. What we do is we reverse a little bit the process. We have the open call, then we have a technical evaluation and shortlisting. So experts evaluate the calls, but instead of announcing a winner or a set of winners, we just make a short list. So instead of having a winner or 5 winners, we set the ones that are more, that are technical feasible, and maybe it's a set of 10 or 15. And then we give the voting, the end voting to the citizens. And that's also interesting. It's like, okay, we make sure that these things, they can happen on the specific time, but the organization doesn't make the final decision. So we just make sure that the shortlisted ones are feasible, they can happen. And then we give to the floor to citizens or to a public debate on which ones are the ones that have to, they have to be implemented. And that is a small move, but it really increases citizen engagement. And then people will be more prone to follow up during the implementation because it was being selected by them while maintaining technical feasibility, right? So I think I'm going to stop now. I'm being a little bit longer than I expected, but it was a lot to cover. And I think we can open now the questions and answers. So the first question, let's go first with the written question. How to engage and empower the most vulnerable groups in a participatory process? That's very interesting, and also it takes time. It's something that can be rushed. in our experience, that, for example, we have been involved in the creation of gardens in deprived neighborhoods, is just there is going to be a resistance, an initial resistance to this process, especially if they are coming from the outside or in neglected areas in which they hardly even seen officials going there before, or maybe the process in the past were misunderstood. So there is people are going to be either they are not aware of participatory process in the past, or they have been part in these processes and they are not happy about it. So we need to be very patient, and we need to create, you see, if we devise or design a process that is, and we are thinking in mid long term, of course, and we are able to introduce actions, steps at the beginning that they are not just because that's something that we think is sometimes a bit misunderstood. It's not just this kind of parties or celebration. They can have that component, but it's important that we say clearly how this is going to be used for the final outcome. Because if we do some cool events with kids playing Lego and these really cool things, but nobody really understand how this is going to be translated into actual things. People can be engaged on that process, in the very first process, but they will lose interest, when they see that this is not related with this, and it's not just including on a picture of that drawing on the development plan. It needs to be something much more sophisticated, I would say, discussed and debated, right? So it's, I would say there is no like a magical recipe. It takes a lot of time. You need to be also aware of that there might be previous resistance because some kind of failed process or project that happened on that area or with these groups in the past. Okay, then should citizens be considered a stakeholder? How citizens relate to other stakeholders? Yeah, stakeholder. When I'm in Spanish myself, I don't like really that when you translate the stakeholder into Spanish, I don't like to use that word in this concept. But it's true that the stakeholder is using citizen participation in English. It's a common word. I think so. Citizens is one of these. If you are based in the kind of more shared literature about participation, you have this kind of quadruple helix of participation, and citizens are part of this quadruple helix of different stakeholders. Then you have the private companies, and you have research and academia, and then public organizations. I think how citizens relate to other stakeholders is the second part of the question. I think it's maybe for us it's also sometimes misunderstood when we talk with people in municipal organizations that they don't have previous experience on citizen participation. When we talk about involving citizens, they normally imagine like these super chaotic processes in which everybody's raising their hand at the same time, and it's very noisy, and people are complaining all the time. I think that's partly true because in some kind of these open floor events that happens, we are seeing that when we are translating that into online environments in the last 3 months, that's also happening as well. I think it can happen. We can introduce citizen participation in a very, very profound way if it's well planned and staged, right? For example, if you in the open call thing, so we have 20 submissions, right? And then the experts can shortlist that, so can reduce, okay, out of these 20, there are 7 that are really good and they can happen. So in that phase, let's move on and just bring that selection to the citizens, right? And of course, there are resources and deadlines that we need to consider. But well, if we can't do like a citywide voting with voting stations, that is really complicated, you can do a few things. First, you can group a number of these votings into one, which is done in kind of political elections all the time. So you're voting many things in one go. Or then you can use online tools that maybe they are not, that open, or but it's better than just making that selection internal, right? So there are ways of doing this if you plan and stage the different phases in advance. Okay, and then how do you make sure, this is the final question, the written question, and then we open to the floor. How do you make sure the training of citizens does not compromise their position? Example, how to make sure that they are not in effect transformed into the kinds of actors that technocrats, bureaucrats would like to see? That's a very good question, and yeah, maybe training. We had the educated bit, and we changed that into training, because yeah, there is that's a common thing that is said in when planning. People they don't go to contemporary art museums because they're not educated into contemporary art. So we need to educate them, and there is a kind of a common misconception. Yeah, I would say training is more. Let me give you an example. We are involved in the creation of maker spaces and fab labs. So there's a highly level of training there, but it's this idea, for example, if we are talking in the smart city projects and we are talking about certain technologies, so that's something that we have done in CityxChange, we as Colaborativa, we have selected, so this is a kind of plan of bottom-up. We have selected a number of open source communities, global communities on energy, right? On energy creation, energy monitoring, citizen sensing, and what we do in the Fab Lab or in a makerspace, in any kind of, I would say, grassroots open space for innovation that is open to everybody. You can create training elements, training courses that are kind of loose training, we say, or peer-to-peer training, like for example, a weekly group on citizen sensing that we have in Limerick, right? So people there gather to, everything. You have the real expert, the guy who works doing this professionally in the mornings, and then in the evenings, because that's something that he does. He has a passion on this. He's happy to share his experience, his knowledge, his professional knowledge in a more amateur environment, and talk with other users. And you create user groups around certain technologies, right? So that's what we mean with training. It's like if we talk about, for example, now the data in this project became an issue suddenly with the new European legislation. At the beginning of the project, we were, there were a lot of concerns about data privacy and so on. So, for example, training in that sense would be to create user groups, local user groups on these topics, because this affects a lot of people. There are activists working on that. And if you create these user groups, you can have people that are super experts and people that are just curious about it. And they can join together and discuss. And if you are able to have spaces, now we have to think on online spaces, which is a bit more challenging, for these people to meet in a regular basis. This is a way of training people into complex topics, right? You can do the same with participatory budgeting, with mobility, and there are always, creative ways of doing that without being like the word of educating, right? That it seems that you're sitting a bunch of people and in a unilateral way say, you have to think in this and this and this way, which is exactly what you were questioning in your question. Okay, so that's are the questions that were written. We have a bit more time. I think we have another 10 minutes. So if you want to raise your hand, Sarin asked, have you worked with different citizen groups? Yeah, well, in Collaborativa, in our experience, as I said, we have been working with citizens for 10 years. It is true that we are more specialized in kind of bottom-up approaches. So yeah, we work, for example, as I said on the example on the talk, making urban gardens in deprived neighborhoods. Using empty lots to create urban gardens. Our experience is that it takes a lot of time. Sometimes, like 18 months to just get and open up a little bit of complicity with certain groups, especially in areas that have been neglected for a long time. Because you have to understand that if nothing had happened for 20 years, and that's normally in special in areas that are deprived, that's one of the reasons. Nothing had happened, or a lot of little interest had happened there for years and years. People are not to be, are going to be cautious on anyone saying that you are going to revitalize the neighborhood and preparing things. So it takes a lot of time. People not showing up the first time, but being constant. And again, in areas in which these processes are well greased and they have good experiences in the past, in our experience is much easier, because people will be people will be knocking your door to participate. It's the areas or the groups that are not knocking their door, the ones that they need more careful planning and time. So then we have RIM. Are there special tools or methodologies to apply public participation methods in historical context? UNESCO World Heritage City. Okay, so we are based in Cordoba, which is actually a UNESCO World Heritage City. I would say that it depends on, I would say maybe on the categories you can fit tools, specific tools. I think it will depend on the context. I don't think there is a special methodology, but of course, every process should be, as I said on the talk, it needs to be aligned with the context of your city. So, for example, if I think about Cordoba, it will be very different. The city center, which has some challenges, will be like the touristic flats pressure, hotels, restaurants, and so on. If you have stakeholders like businesses that they're well organized, I'm thinking in the context maybe on a historic city center. You have to be careful of, because there are certain stakeholders that, because of their nature, they are already well organized and they have organizations to represent them and their interest. And then that might displace other groups that are living there or working there, that they don't have a strong representation already established. So it's always important to acknowledge that and analyze that. I think it's useful maybe to have a look at previous experiences. I presume that if you are not, for example, in the planning department, the planning department of UNESCO World Heritage City will have some experience of citizen participation, because you need to set certain requirements for that. So maybe you can tap and pick their brain and see what had worked and what didn't work. And then if you are able to list, this is an exercise that we do normally, is that we do like a brainstorming session of just on top of your head, list organizations that you want to engage with. And then you start listing, and maybe you list 30 or 40 of them. And then you try to match this with the quadruple helix, these 4 groups. And if you feel that you have one group misrepresented, that gives you a clue of people or stakeholders that are not on top of your head, that you should design specific events or tools to engage with, because maybe they are misrepresented, maybe they are not knocking your door all the time. You tend to forget them.
Sorry, hello. Yes, my name is Frank. I am a member of ISOCARP, International Society of City and Regional Planners. Thank you for this interesting session. Yeah, it's close to my heart. I'm doing since many years participatory visioning workshops in developing countries mostly. But yeah, my problem is we always reach out to affluent people, literate people. They are part of the governmental system. They are representing well-resourced NGOs and so on. But it's damn hard to reach out to the more vulnerable groups, the ones that really need participation, because all these others have their power lines or influence in the decision making already. So yeah, my question is how can we develop tools to engage them more? And I will relate this or connect this to an initiative of ISOCARP to launch something called Global Planning Aid, which is about reaching out to the most vulnerable groups, communities, and not in a way that is kind of post-colonial white skilled people going into communities to explain how participation should be done, but a kind of training of trainers system, and with the goal actually to make planners out of community workers, because I don't believe that you can have a meaningful participation without a kind of basic training, a basic understanding of what planning, neighborhood planning, community planning is about. They listen, they consume, they nod maybe, but it's not real. They are missing out important elements to contribute. It's a kind of illiteracy. It's not just not be able to read. It's not able to understand what is planning about. So barefoot planning is really trying to basically educate community workers to be able to contribute to planning processes. And it would be interesting to team up with CityxChange to see what kind of tools we could fine tune to reach out to those most vulnerable groups. Vulnerable in terms of poverty, inequality, minority, LGBT groups, or ethnical groups, even in the global north, like Roma people, or so really to look for specific training. Training and engagement tools for the most vulnerable in the global north, but also in the global south. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with your, that seems like is the most difficult element. And, as you currently explained, it's very difficult just to be flow over there, and then you're going to be exposed to groups that they, as you know, said, you know, they're already knocking the doors, right? So and then you just you have a huge bias of misrepresentation of certain groups. There is no we don't have experience on developing countries. We, for example, have experience in Cordoba, believe it or not. Well, it's already a poor city. Certain parts of Cordoba are one of the poorest areas in Europe, and they have certain neighborhoods have designated statistical areas in Europe because of their special needs. We have done certain work there. You know, it's very difficult to revert decades of neglection. It's extremely difficult, and there is no silver bullet for that. Actually, the process that we had better results is the process that took 2 years, 2.5 years of very slowly, painfully setting up, I would say, a location there, but it could be like a regular meetings. So you do there, and you get to know people, and you start building trust, and you're doing things. It's not just, and then, you know, month by month, people open up, and they are more willing to participate in the process. I remember, for example, and then you can introduce planning things. For example, in this project of the urban gardens in the public plots. At the beginning, everybody wanted to put like high fences, and, you know, just because like they didn't trust the other members of the community, and it was a process of almost just 1 year of talking about public space, the understanding of public space, creating events on that garden, that some people understood that, you know, by putting a 3-meter fence around the area, just solving certain short-term problems of vandalism, but you are generating other mid-term and long-term problems that are related to, you know, public space and you know, the use of civic facilities. So yeah, I completely agree with you. I don't have experience on developing countries. I would love to hear more and see how we could, you know, we can learn more about it. Okay, so thank you, everyone. I hope it was useful for you. It was great to share the work that we have been doing for the last 1.5 years in this project. Looking forward to hear more from you, and let's keep in touch. Stay safe, and see you next time.